Yeah, absolutely. All right, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Kesubos Daf Tzadi Tes and Daf Kuf. We're into the triple digits at Daf 100 of Maseches Kesubos, and we'll be learning the first Amud there as well. I'll just say this on the recording for those who are out there and those who are listening. Hi, Steve. I'm going to try and finagle something about Sunday morning to not give, and we'll hopefully overteach on Shabbos and then overteach on Monday. Monday's Yom Tov already, right? Monday. Yeah, and overteach on Monday. I don't know. We'll try so that we don't have to have such an early shiur and a limiting shiur on Hoshana Rabbah morning. Let's get started. We're about 8-9 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Chesed Beis at the word Tashma. We have been discussing a case. It was a case that was brought up in the Beis Medrash. That's 1/3 of the way down. And the case was where the Baal Habayis says to an Eved, go sell my property that's the size of a lesech. And instead, the person sold a property that was double that size. So we were debating, is that called I listened to part of what you said and then went further? Or is that called I didn't listen to you? We were debating this. And we're actually going to see another source now to try and answer this question. And then the Gemara is going to flip the whole question as a version 2 of our Gemara. But let's finish up version number 1. 8 lines from the bottom, Tzadi Chesed Beis, Tashma. Hayasa ksubasa mana umachra shvei mana v'dinar b'mana. A woman's ksuba, the contract when she got married, it says that it's worth 100 zuz. She sells a property that's worth 100 zuz plus a dinar, and she gets a mana for it. We had said in our Mishnah, machra bata. That sale is completely inappropriate and it doesn't work. The reason why it makes no sense is because her ksuba was only 100. She went and took 100 mana plus a dinar of somebody else. That's not hers to take. The whole contract is null and void. Doesn't work. My love, isn't this the case? Isn't this case the Zavin Shivem Mana V'Dinar, where she sold a property that's worth 100 mana and 1 dinar, and she got back V'Mana V'Dinar. So, okay, who cares? Whichever one it is, what's the difference? Umay B'Mana. What then did the Mishnah say b'mana? To say mana shala, that she gets to keep, that she gets to only keep the one. Says the Gemara, well, that doesn't work because our Mishnah had said that she would then go back and give the other dinar. Umay afilu, that even if she were to give back that extra dinar, then all should be fine and good. Afilu, what does it mean? What is that afilu in our Mishnah? Afilu hi omeres achzeres adinar liyorshim b'dinar mikar koi. Even if I give back the surplus of property above the ksuba cost back to the rightful owners, to the Yisomim. So then we should say, even Stephen, all is fine and good. Nope, the Katani still we say machra batel. We still say that the whole sale is not good. That shows us that that what the shliach did, that mavir, we're talking about someone who didn't listen well. The whole contract is null and void. Why would we say that? Let's remember the case that we started with. We started with a case of, hey, I'm the Baal Habayis, you're my shliach. Please go sell my property that's worth a lesech. And you as the shliach, you take matters into your own hands. You don't sell the property that's worth a lesech, that's worth 100. You sell a property that's worth a kur. A kur is 2x. It's twice as much as a lesech. So says the Gemara, that's our case with the woman in our Mishnah. What did she do? I'm only owed a mana. She took a mana plus. She took more than she was supposed to. Same as the case. He sold more than he was supposed to. We see machra batel. Maybe we can extrapolate from our Mishnah back to the question that was at the top of this Amud, and we can deduce and say, hey, it must be mavir that the shliach didn't listen well, and machra batel, and therefore mavir that when a shliach oversells, the first half, which he was asked to sell, doesn't even count. The Gemara says, nope, not a good raya. Why not? 2 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Rav Huna b'reid Rav Nasan lo. That's not a good comparison. Bide ozil, that we're talking about where it was not a case where she sold a property of mana v'dinar and got back mana v'dinar. It's rather where she sold a case where bide ozil, where she sold it at a lower cost. Ozil, from the word zol, cheaper. She sold the property. Her ksuba was 100. She sells a property of 100 dinar, 100 mana plus 1 dinar. What does she get back? Only the mana. And that's what actually happened, says the Gemara. Well, if that's true, top of Tzadi Testament Aleph, that can't be. Because Hamid Seifa bid ozel, Habi Reisha bid lo ozel. If the latter part of our Mishnah was talking about a case where a woman she tried to sell a property, it was valued at X and she got X minus 1. We already have that case because the Seifa talks about that. What does the Seifa say? Diktani. We have in our Mishnah, Seifa, what does the Seifa say? Hayasa Kesubasa Arba Meos Zuz. Remember the wife of the rich husband. Her ksuba has 400 zuz. And machra lazeh b'mana v'lazeh b'mana. And when it was time for her to collect a ksuba, she went to multiple buyers with pieces of land that belonged to the estate of her now dead husband. And she sold 100 at a time. Ula acharon, what about the last guy? So let's say Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, she sells a field to Ruvain for 100. Now she's only owed 300. Then she sells another 100 to Shimon, and then another 100 to Levi. She sold 3 properties, 100 a pop. What's her balance due to her? 100. So 400 minus 3 sales of 100 is 100. Ula acharon, and then to Yisachar, what sale does she make to Yisachar? Mana v'dinar b'mana. She sells a property that's mana v'dinar. She sells a property that's above the amount that she's owed. She's only owed 100, but the property that she took from the estates to cash out for the last part of her ksuba was 100 plus a dinar. She was only owed 100. And shall achron machra batel shall kulan machran kayam. And what we saw in our Mishnah, that in such a case where she sells the 100 plus a dinar only for 100, we say that it doesn't work. So we already have a discussion in our Mishnah about bid'ozil, which is an undersell. How can you say that the Reisha is talking about bid'ozil when the Seifa is also talking about bid'ozil? They're both talking about the same thing. Says the Gemara. No, you have a total misunderstanding here. 5 lines down. Reisha v'Seifa bid'ozil. Both the Reisha and the Seifa are talking about a case where she sells a property for less than it's actually worth. It's worth 100. She sells it for 90. This Seifa, what is this last case that we just learned? The case of the 400 zuz. The Seifa kamash malan taima de ozel bidiyasme. The reason over there why things didn't work out is because she did something that wasn't right to the assomim. Aval bidida, maybe as it relates to herself, if she took the loss, because where does that money go that she sells? Hers. If she sells 100, if she sells a property worth 100 and it's only 90, the Yisomim don't lose out. Did a great job. So kamat machra kayam. Then I would have made the assertion that would actually work. Says the Gemara, that can't be either, because Hamid the Reisha shamas mino, that we already learned out from the Reisha. Where did we see in the Reisha that the losses that she incurs belong to her and only her? That's clear. 8 lines down. She has a 200 zuz ksuba. She sells a property that was worth 100 and pulls in 2. Oh, shavim masayim b'mana. Or she sells a property that's worth 200 and she only gets 100 out of it. What did we say? The halacha was niskabla ksubasa, that she does absorb the loss if the money's only going to her. So it can't be that we're learning the same thing twice in the same Mishnah. That's for sure not. So says the Gemara, Ma'u detema, what might I have thought? Hasam, that case is different. In the Reisha, in the Mishnah, where it speaks about the woman who sells a property that's worth 200 and she sells it for 100, there, Mahu detema hasam hu de istalkala mehai beso lagamre. When she makes this sale of a property that's worth 200 and only pulls in 100, maybe that case is different because now she's severing her whole connection to that family. You have one thing that you owe me. You owe me my ksuba. Great, go sell the field. So she takes a field that's worth 200. She sells it for 100. Maybe that case is different than our case. Aval hacha, maybe here in the case where there's 400 zuz and she's selling to 4 different people. Nigzor mana rishon atu mana achron. Maybe we should make a gezerah, a rabbinic injunction that forbids the sale of the 100. Let's say the first 3 guys to whom she is selling properties of 100 apiece. She hasn't even gotten to her balance yet. She's still owed another 100. Maybe we should have a rabbinic injunction against those first 3 sales because we know the last one doesn't work. Kamash malan, that's not the case. Now, all of this is version 1 of the Gemara, where we're trying to understand the question of a balabais tells a slave, please go sell a lesech, please go sell one of my properties. And instead, the guy doesn't listen and gives over double the properties. He sells more. But really, says the Gemara, V'ika de Amri, a third of the way down on Sadi Tesamad Aleph, really, loti baila. Really, that isn't a shaila at all. Heicha de Omar le'zil zaven li lischa, v'zaven li kura, devadai mosif al dvarav have. The Gemara assumes bipashtus, which is not, shouldn't be pashut, because we have a lot of Mari Makomos that would combat this idea. But nevertheless, the Gemara assumes, takes it just as an assumption, that in a case where the whole case we've been dealing with over the last Amud, in a case where a balabai says, please go sell a lesech of my property, and the shliach the house manager actually sells a kur double, that everyone agrees it's mosif, which means that the lesech volume of property sold counts and the balance does not count. Really, that case is obvious. Kiti bailach, where is it that we actually have our shaila? That is the Amar Le Zilzavin Likura. I want you to sell the more expensive one, and then the shliach doesn't listen. What would the halacha be in that case? Let me just structure what we learned yesterday and what we learned today. Yesterday, he was asked to sell a cheaper property and he sold a more expensive one. Today, the Gemara is saying that case is obviously a case of mosif. And the first part of the sale is valid. The second part of the sale is not. The Gemara is now flipping the question and saying the Balabais asks the house manager to sell a property that's a kur, more expensive, and the house manager doesn't listen and sells a property that's less expensive. What would the halacha be? And the Gemara here articulates both sides of what we might be thinking here. Mi omrinan, do we say, Omar le, the tavalach abdilach? The house manager will say to the balabais, I did you a favor. How did I do you a favor? Because you don't want to be too liquid. You don't want to have too much cash on hand. If you really didn't need all of these coins, I can't go back. You're going to be stuck with all of this money out of the bank. No interest will be gained. No benefits to be had. Odilma, or perhaps maybe we would argue in the flip way, halfway down. Odilma, Amarle, lo nichali delifshu stari ilvai. I don't want to have so many contracts with so many people. I didn't ask you to think for me. I asked you to go sell my properties. You're giving me a svara that maybe I might have extra zuzim on my hand because I can't put it back into the bank. I don't care. I'm the owner. I asked you to do something. So the house manager is saying, I'm doing you a favor. I don't want to have too much cash on hand. The balabais is saying, who asked you? This isn't a democracy. You're my employee. I don't want to have more staros on my hands. When you break up my properties into two sales, now I have two annoying people to deal with instead of one. I only want one. You made a mistake. So which side of this chakira is the right side of the chakira? Says the Gemara, Amar of Chanina Misura, Toshma, I'll give you a good answer. Nasan lo dinar shel zahav. The balabais gives the house manager a dinar of zahav. And that's really, there are 6 coins within a dinar of zahav. V'omar, and he says to him, V'omar lo, haveli chaluk. Please go to the store. I want you to go to the hat box, and I want you to buy me one of those non-iron shirts. It's worth 3 coins. So the Gemara says, V'halach, v'hevi lo, v'shalosh chaluk u'v'shalosh talas. So remember, the dinar is 6. He says, here's a dinar, which is worth 6. Go buy me a shirt. What does he come home with? A shirt and a talis. So the Gemara says, at that moment, we then find out that these monies were really me'ila, and you're not allowed to use them. And the Gemara says, Shnehem ma'alu. Both of them have violated me'ila. Now, Iamris bishlama shliach ki haygavna ose shlichuso umosiv al dvarav have. If you want to say that the house manager, the shliach, he did his shlichus. You asked me to buy you a shirt. I bought you a shirt. But then I additionally took the balance of the 6 coins and also bought you a talis. So then I could understand mishum hachi balabais. I could understand, because at the end of the day, I did exactly what the balabais asked me to do. He wanted a shirt. I came home with a shirt. Okay. But if you want to say that really it's mavir, that really, even though I did what you said, but because I stepped out of bounds and did more than what you said, the whole thing retroactively is a 0 because I'm not good at listening. Phil, can you please go buy me a shirt? And I come home with the whole store. That's not, I do that all the time. That's not helpful. Nobody asked me to buy more. I went to Hungarian today, whatever it's called, to buy 2 things. My bill when I left was $177. How is that even possible? I'm a very bad messenger. Now, in my dynamic, I'm allowed to spend money on my own credit card. No problem at all. But if I was a real shaliach, the Gemara would say in this frame, you can't do that. I gave you 6 coins to go buy a shirt. Why did you come home with a shirt and a talis? So the Gemara says that if you're going to say that the shaliach is a rebel, and by buying the talis, he's indicating that he's really not listening to the owner, amai mo'al. Why would we have then said that the balabais violated me'ila? We learned at the bottom of Tzadi Chesam and Beis at the end of the day yesterday This is about 2/3 of the way down. What we learned there is that lo asa shlichuso shliach ma'al, is that if the shliach violates the shlichus, then it's not the problem of the balabayis anymore. But we see that there is me'ila. So maybe we should say from here that halacha l'maisa, it is mosif and not mavir. Says the Gemara, no, can't do that. Why? On what was going on in this case of me'ila? Says the Gemara, de'aisila shavesh sheish b'shalosh. I went into the hat box. I went to the rack and I picked out the perfect shirt. Exactly the right collar size, exactly the right sleeve length, and exactly the right fit. And it was worth 6. And when I got up to the counter, he said, half off sale. It's only worth 3. And then I took the other 3 and I bought a tallis with it. But I did what you wanted. So maybe this case is different, says the Gemara, because I literally picked a shirt off the rack that was the exact cost that you asked me to buy. Says Gemara, if that's true, then why did the shliach get a punishment of me'ila? Answers the Gemara, because he's an idiot. He bought a tallis. Nobody asked you to spend my money that way. Says Gemara, because a tallis. The Gemara says, if this is true, then I don't understand the seifa. The seifa of what? The seifa of this case in me'ila. The case of me'ila is what we've been learning. Here are 6 coins. Please go shopping for me. What's the seifa of that brisa? Rabbi Yehuda. 5 lines from the bottom. A maseifa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Af bazeh bal habayis lo ma'al. Even in this case, there's no me'ila. Mipnei sheyachol lomar chala gadol ha'isi mevakesh ve'ata habesili chala katan v'ra. Really, says Rabbi Yehuda, you didn't do what I said, and there's no me'ila by me at all. Irrelevant of whether or not the shlichus was performed, because I wanted a better version of what you bought, and you gave me something ra. My ra, says the Gemara. What's ra in this case? The Gemara says ra bidamim. It's less money than I wanted to spend. There's actually a psychology. I can't remember what it is. There's a psychology. I think I have this psychology that I actually enjoy buying products that cost more money than their counterparts, because in my brain I have this wiring that therefore you're getting more for it. It doesn't mean I'm right. It's just my wiring. So sometimes I see 2 things. I'm like, if I can afford it, I think I'm going to splurge. What?
If Secrets had a generic, would you buy the generic?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. You don't mess with magic. No way. No way. For sure not. Sure not. The shirts that I wear, the shirts, Charles Turret shirts, there you go to the store, they'll be $109. I never buy those shirts at that price. Every year you get 4 for $99. So I stock up. It's the same exact shirt, just cheaper. But here he's saying, I wanted you to spend more money because the more you spend, the more the shirt is actually worth, as we'll see in a moment. To Amar Le, Isis li b'shis, had you actually bought that shirt, which today at its market value is worth 6, if really in the market the shirt was selling, if it's a half off sale, then buy me one for 6, because then it's worth 12. So he says, I didn't ask you to buy me the shirt at 3. Buy me the shirt that's worth 6 today. It's a better shirt. This is my budget. It's my line item. Go shopping. Buy me a better shirt at 6 than a lesser shirt at 3. I don't want you to save me money because you hurt me just now. Not only did you not do what I said, but I lost money in the market, because if I want to take that and I have an Amazon account, I'm sending you to the store. All the shirts worth 6, bring them home. I come home, I want to flip them and sell them for 9 and keep a profit of 3. Great. Now you messed me over. So that's what the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda. And Dekanami, I can prove this. How can we prove this? Dekanami, what? That we can prove what? Rashi, 6 lines from the bottom. Dekanami. I can prove to you. Derad Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Damin Kamar. I can prove this. How? Says the Gemara. Last line, Sadi Testament Aleph. Diktani, what did we say? Or what did it say over there? Because we didn't say this. Mo de Rabbi Yehuda bekitnis sheshnehem malu. Rabbi Yehuda would agree that in a case where he's selling kitnis, he's selling legumes, he's selling peanuts, whatever the legumes are, that the din would be sheshnehem malu. Why? Top of Daf Tzadi Testament base, Sha kitnis besela bekitnis bepruta. Because you're going to buy 20 for $1, or you're going to buy 1 for 5 cents. It's the same exact pricing, and it doesn't matter. So in that case, when I do more, then we're both being mal. Nothing really changed, because you didn't buy a lower quality of the market value is consistent across the board. Yeah, Ledugma, let's just imagine this is like gasoline. Like gasoline always sells an X per gallon. You don't get discounts if you fill up your whole tank at once. So they're saying the same things about legumes. And Shema Mina that this is exactly what Rabbi Huda is talking about. Hechidami, what's the case of the kidneys? Ilema be'asra demizavne b'shuma. If you want to say that it's a place where they just approximate, Hecha de yoiv lasela mosli gabetfe. I'm buying for a sela. Normally a sela we get a pound. For a sela, I'll give you a pound and throw in. If you ever get 25 munchkins from Dunkin', it's never 25 munchkins. It's always 30. You're buying b'shuma. You're buying with an approximation. So it says the Gemara, no, of course that's not what's happening, because otherwise that's literally the exact opposite point Rabbi Huda was trying to make. No, it has to be Amar Papa be'asra de kaili bekani. The way that they actually do this is they scoop out. We have the 1 cup measures. We take the spatula and we smoothly clean off the top to make it perfect. This is what you're getting for your sela. Dump it into a bag, zip tie it, goodbye. Get out of my store. That's what we have to be talking about. The Amar Le, kana bepruta. Everyone knows that the sale, everyone knew back in the day that the kidneys were sold at this particular rate. So that's what the Gemara wants to suggest over here, that we actually have a strong approach, a reasonable approach to assume that we are talking about a case of mavir where the shliach is totally off base. Let's continue learning. We're on the top of Tzadi Testament base, and we are, where are we? 5 lines down. Thank you. Toshma. Haisa Kesubos arba me'ov zuz, the case that we know about. She has a very high ksuba dollar amount. Machra lezeh b'mana v'lezeh b'mana. She sells the first 100 of the husband's estate and the second and the third. Ula'achron, for the fourth husband, for the fourth sale, fourth property, not the fourth husband. For the fourth sale of her ksuba, it's to the fourth person. She's only owed 100. What did she do? Ula'achron, she had a field that was worth yafem mana v'dinar. It was worth a mana plus a dinar. She sold it b'mana. And what did we say? Shal achron batel v'shal kulan machron kayam. That for the last person, the sale is completely gone. And for everybody else, the sale actually works. So what do we see? We see that the first few sales were less than the total, and the sale totally worked. So says the Gemara, what must be going on in this case? The only reason why those sales actually worked is because the only properties that guy had were ketini. They were very small properties at 100 a pop. Otherwise, according to this approach, the Gemara seems to imply that our Mishnah would not have allowed for her to make these smaller sales. If there was a property worth 400, she would have to sell that and not the 100. 100s and 100s broken up. And Hachanami Biktini. We'll see more about this later today. Quarter of the way down, the Gemara says, Pshita, what's obvious? That Amar le'echad v'lo l'shnayim. If a balabais would say to his shaliach, I want you to make a sale to only one person, and I want you to specifically not sell to 2 people. There, everyone agrees. Ha'amar le, nothing to talk about. What did he say? Le'echad v'lo l'shnayim. But what if he said, Amar le le'echad, stama, mine. Please go sell this to someone. Just like that. Doesn't mean I don't know what his deeper intentions are. Does he not want me to sell to 2? Says the Gemara, this is a machlokes. Rav Huna says that if a person were to say, if a balabais were to say to a shliach, stama, I only want you to sell this to I want you to sell this to someone, but it's a non-specific title. Says the Gemara, then we imply strictly from him that if he says, please go sell this to someone, that even though it was stam, he cannot sell it to 2 people. However, and we paskin like this second shita, Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna the Amri Tarvayu le'echad ba'afilu l'shnayim le'echad ba'afilu l'meya. The shliach can do whatever he wants. He can sell to as many people as he wants. Now, I already told you how we paskin, but the reason I know that is because of the next few lines. Ikla Rav Nachman the Surah. Rav Nachman went to Surah. Ol legabe Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna. They came to visit him, and they were talking and learning. Amr leiki hai gavna mai. What would be the case in our case? Namely, let's ask the question again. What would be the halacha in a case where the balabais says to the shaliach, please go sell my property to someone? He doesn't say to not sell it to 2 people. He just says, go sell it to somebody. So it says the Gemara, Amar lehu le'echad ve'afilu l'shnayim le'echad ve'afilu l'meya. You can sell it to as many people as you want. Amru le, they said to Mafal Gavda to shliach. Would this also be true if he made a shliach? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is a little bit more than halfway down. Dibur hamaschil ve'afal Gavda to shliach. What was his mistake? Umachar bezol. Maybe we should say that it's still kayam if he sells it for less than it's worth. Amar lahu, no, the tashliach lo kamin. I wasn't talking about that case. Says the Gemara, but if the shliach sells it for less, you should have been talking about that case because amrulay, we have a rule. The amar mar ein ona lekarkos. We know that there are general rules about not overcharging when you're making a sale. If I'm running a business and I'm selling a product of a finite cost, I'm only allowed to increase the costs by a particular amount. It's not whatever I want. So says the Gemara, when it comes to karkos, there are no rules of ona. That only applies to metaltalin. So therefore, it should be the case that if the shliach makes an error by bringing in too little money, that there should be nothing wrong with that. Says the Gemara, that rule of ein ona karkos, hanimili hechad balabayis. That's only true for the owner of the house. However, aval ta shliach amar le liskune shedartich below la'avavasi. I didn't send you out to do work for me to mess me over. I sent you out to do work to help me out. You have a job. Your job is to sell my products. If you bring in less money than I'm spending, you're bad at your job. So I'm going to hold that over your head. If I do it, it's a risk that I'm willing to take. That's up to me. But if you're my shliach, you're not allowed to do that. Uminat timra, a little bit more than halfway down. Uminat timra the shiny ben shliach labalabais. Where do we see precedence for distinguishing between ona and karka, between a balabais and a shliach? It's not. We have a Mishnah. This Mishnah can be found in Maseches Trumos, and the Mishnah reads as follows: Ha'omer l'shluchot sei utrom. A person, a balabais, says to his shaliach, "Please go out and donate." Torem kedas balabais. He needs to follow whatever the ratzon of the owner is. The Gemara then says, "V'imeno yodea daito shel balabais." What if the shaliach doesn't know? Because we know that by truma there isn't a fixed price. What if he doesn't know how much he wants the balabais to give? Oh, says the Gemara, then do what's normal. Says the Gemara, Torem bebeinanis echad mechamishim. That's normal. That's what people do. That's what people do. So let's say, for example, the balabais says to the shliach, "Please go pay the guy at the door for the pizza." Okay, can I give him a tip? I don't know the daito shel. So we do what's normal. Something that's on the bottom of the receipt is normal. You want to give a 50% tip? That's ridiculous. You want to give a $1 tip? You're a jerk. Do what's normal. On the bottom, 15, whatever the number is. 15, 18, 20% normal stuff. So same thing over here. You have to be a mensch. You have to make a good decision. Piches asara or hosif asara, truma so truma. We even have a margin of error. If he was 10 points off in the bottom number, in other words, if it was not 150th, but between 140th and 160th, a plus or minus of that bottom number being 10, no problem. Bilugabe balabais. But if I'm the guy who's writing the check, it's my money, and I was really impressed with your service. Tanya, what does the Brisa say? Even if it wasn't anywhere near the norms of 140th to 160th of the truma, I ended up giving 120. It's not 2%, it's 5%. It's a massive amount of truma. Doesn't matter. Truma so truma. We therefore see the distinction between a balabais and a shliach. The shliach has parameters of normalcy that are required of him. If I'm the shliach and you give me your credit card, I have to behave like a mensch with your credit card. But if it's my credit, I can do whatever I want. I can empty my bank. It's my money, no problem. And therefore, the truma that I give can be way, way, way more extreme than the one that the shliach can. That's obvious. It's intuitive, and more importantly than our feelings, is it's coded here in the Mishnah. Tashma. Let's talk about the case that we're talking about as it relates to our Mishnah. The case we're talking about is a case where a person said, "Le'echad stama, please go sell my property to someone." Says the Gemara, Tashma, Hayasak subasa arba me'ozuz, for the fourth time today. Machra lezebemana, ulezebemana, ulachron shveimana, v'dinar bemana. Shal achron batel, shal kulan machron kayam. What does the Gemara say? The Gemara says the first three sales are valid. How did you sell to multiple people? The haraya that you're allowed to sell to multiple people. That's a beautiful raya. That's our Mishnah, black on white. She is very good. She is treated as a shliach in concept. Well, that's great. The Rishonim discussed that. I should have said that. She is treated like a shliach in comparison. Why? Because she's doing the liquidation of the property of the husband's estate. The husband could have done it. Maybe he even should have done it. but she didn't. So she functions as a shliach, and we treat her as a shliach as well. And the Gemara says we have a raya berura from here that she who's functioning as a shliach, we therefore see precedence in our Mishnah that if there was a case of stama where we don't have an indication of how many shtaros we should give out from the estate of the husband, she can give out seemingly as many as she wants until she gets to her ksuba. That's what the Gemara says. That's what the Gemara suggests. And the Gemara says, no raya. Amar of Shisha Bereder of Idi Bektini. You can't bring a raya from our Mishnah because as we've already concluded earlier today on the top of this page, we concluded that the case in our Mishnah was a case where that's all the types of properties that he had. He only had properties that were worth 100, 100, 100, and 101. That's it. That's all he had. So therefore, we can't bring a raya from there. But Taka, had it been that in our Mishnah they were dealing with a case of 400, we would have been able to infer that you're allowed to break up those payments. We no longer have a raya, and we don't know the answer to our question as we end our Gemara as to whether or not. I mean, we know in Psak, but we don't know from Shak L'Batari. We know what to do, but we don't know why. And our Gemara does conclude here at the end with nothing crystal clear, but the Gemara does say that the Amoraim paskin that we are allowed to sell to multiple people. Next Mishnah, 6 lines from the bottom, Tzadi Testament Beis, another Amud to go, perfect timing. Shum hadayanim shepichsu shisus ohosifu shisus machron batel. If the dayanim make an assessment of an item in Bezdin, they're making a hasha'ara that you owe X for object Y, whatever the math equation is that they're making. What?
It sounds like that's over and under 6.
Oh, we're just getting started. I hesitated with the Mishnayos group to do Nezikin, to like prep for next year. It's a lot. It's like an absolute guarantee of 2 Mishnayos a day. And it's a lot. I'm nervous. But it would probably de-stress my whole next year after that. I don't know. What do you think? Anybody? All right, we'll talk about this later. Shuma Dayanim. What?
That's professor in its own stuff. Right.
I know, but I'm saying it would make Daf Yomi easier if I learned Mishnayos Nezikin well. Oh, I've learned it before. Maybe I'm not going to do it. I'm too nervous.
Just do it for your own sake.
All right. I don't have time. All right. Says the Gemara, if the Dayanim are off by a 1/6 in either direction, machron batal, they're not allowed to do that. We have rules. So no, you're not allowed to do that. Rashba Gomer, what are you talking about? Machron Kayim. This is the power of Bezdin. In K, Makoach Bezdin Yofe. They can't have the same rules as everybody else. There has to be an extra unique power to Bezdin. They should be able to make a psak and have it stick. Aval Imasu Igeres Bikores Beinei. And if there was some type of public sale, a public sale that everybody knew the pricing, afilu machro shave mana b'masayim or shave masayim b'mana. Even if you were off by 100%, doesn't matter. Machron Kayim. Ibayaluhu alam disha question in the Gemara. Shliach keman. What does this question mean? I wish I was there when they were putting the Gemara together to understand why they didn't put Rashi into the text of the Gemara, because Rashi paints a gorgeous, clear picture of what this question means. So the Gemara says Ibayaluhu shliach keman, and Rashi speaks like a Gemara. Take a look at this Rashi. Dibur hamaschel shliach keman. Shliach deta'ah. A shliach who makes an error, keman daininan le. How do we judge him? Do we judge him ke almana daininan le? Shebeta'us koldehu batel. That if an almana makes an error in any way, the whole contract is null and void. Kiditznan shava b'mana v'dinar b'mana machra batel. Remember our case, the last 100. She actually sold 101 of property and pulled out, that's too much. And we said machar and batel. Do we treat him like that? Or as Rashi concludes, oh, kidayanin who ve'ad ta'avishsus. Brilliant. But again, from the Gemara itself, it's very hard to know what the question is. Again, I'm very curious. And historically speaking, there are very, very strong Mari Makomos in the Rishonim that indicate that the Shak L'Vatari of our Gemara, like the back and forth of our Gemara, was not written by Amoraim. There's a strong position that it was written by the Savo Raim. So historically speaking, the way that things were laid out was like this. In the year 220, that was when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died. Just prior to his death, all of the Mishnayos were edited, organized, and codified. Period. The Amoraim gave shiur on those Mishnayos to unpack what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put into the Mishnayos. This was a period that lasted from about 220 until the mid-600s. The next period of time, around 700s and 800s, was when the Gemara started somewhat to appear like we have it, but a lot of the Shak L'Vatari was in the margins. I have a copy of this and I'm a picture of a Tzuras Hadaf that looks like that. And then in the 1400s, they mushed it all together into the Shas that we know of in Warsaw and Poland. So that's how many write this. So it could be that in the early versions, let's say before the Savo Raim came along in the 700s, that None of the Shaklavatari was there. You had Mishnayos, and you had Amoraic statements of like one line. Amar Rava X, Amar Shmuel Y, and done. Sugis were over. That's very likely what Gemara looked like in the 700s. Very likely. So, anyways, this I'm curious. Like, why didn't they put this in? No one would have a clue what.
They understood it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Art Scroll writes, and then soon there's going to be a book on Art Scroll because we don't even understand the English, Where is Yeridas? That's for sure true that there's Yeridas Adoros. It's all about. Yeah, that's a problem too. Perforce is one of their favorite words. Okay, so that's the Gemara's question here: is do we treat a shliach? Do we treat a shliach like an almana, no room for error, or do we treat an alma, or do we treat a shliach like a dayan, and they can make an error of up to a sixth? I love the question. It's such a good question. I just wish the Gemara would have put the question. Says the Gemara, Rava Amar Rav Nachman, top of Kuf Amad Aleph, entering the 100s. Shliach kedayonin, they have a little bit of latitude. A shliach can make an error up to a sixth. Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna, Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna, Amar Rav Nachman. So first it was Rava Amar Rav Nachman. And now it's somebody else in the name of Rav Nachman. Someone in yeshiva wasn't paying attention. Says the Gemara, Ke Almana. That Rav Nachman really felt that a shliach should be treated like an almana, no room for error. Good. Rava Amar Rav Nachman Shteich Kedayanin. Why? Because there's a similarity. Ma dayanin lav ledidhu, av shliach nami lav ledidei. Because the dayanin and the shliach have a common denominator that none of this is for them. It's all for others. Lafuke almana de ledida. But an almana, she needs to be treated more rigidly, because she's the beneficiary of her work. But when the Bezdin is doing something, or when a Shliach is doing something, they're not the beneficiary. So we're more strict by her because we want her to be as yashar as possible. But by them, there's more latitude because they're not even the one. If I'm off by a sixth, my boss loses money. I don't gain money. That's not, it's a different motive. I want to be yashar, but she has a real vested interest to cheat a little bit because all that money goes to her. Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna Amar Rav Nachman Ki Almana Ma Almana Yechida Af Shliach Yachid. Strange comparison. If I would have had to be rude about it, what's the comparison? An almana is one person, and a shliach is one person. Lafuke bezin de rabim ninhu. Anybody else feel like that's a strange common denominator to focus on? It's not. The first one deals with a real halachic concern that she may take. She's more motivated. We have motive for her. Here, there's no. What? Why? He has his boss's credit card. No, he's going to come home. His boss is going to look at the credit card and say, I sent you to spend $100 in Jewel. You spent $112. But he doesn't get the products. He doesn't keep anything. But the almana, if she's playing a game, she keeps it. So they said by the almana, the first shita, got to be strict on her. We can't have her playing these tricks. But this second chakira is Omer Darsheni. It's a very strange chakira. It's very strange. Rashi says, boo, nothing. Okay, so then the Gemara says, V'hilchasa, shliach kelmana. It's like, again, it's so hard to understand these Gemaras. What happened to Rab Nachman? These are two Rab Nachman Talmidim. How did that happen? Where's the trade Amoroi Aliba de Rab Nachman? Even though that's not a common phrase, it happens. Okay. Umayshna, why is this different? Mehaditnan, we have a Marimoko. Ha'omer l'shluchot say utrom torim kedas balabayis. We just saw this on the previous page, that if a balabayis says to a shliach, please go take truma for me, and even though truma doesn't have a fixed amount, he should do what his boss normally does. If he doesn't know what his boss normally does, torim bebenunis echad mechamishim, then he should take 2%. That's a normal thing to do when you don't know what to do. Yeah, again, you have to have a plus minus of reasonable minimal marginal error. Piches asara or hosif asara. If instead of 150th, he was off 10 points, between 140th and 160th, the halacha is truma, so truma, this is normal margin of error. So what is the Gemara saying over here? He's a shliach, and he's not like an almana. The almana has no margin of error. You just said that the halacha is that a shliach has no margin of error. But here, we just said he has a margin of error. So which one is it? Says the Gemara, no. Hasam kevan the ika de torim ba'ayin ra, the ika de torim ba'ayin yafe. There, we're dealing with an arbitrary gift. It's an important gift. It's din doraisa, but it's arbitrary in its volume. We don't care what you give. So some people give ba'ayin ra, they only give 1/100th. They're really cheap. They only give 1%. And there are also people who are torim ba'ayin yafe. They give 1/30th. They give a lot. So Amar Le lahachi, I was just making an assessment. Aval hacha by the almana. To Usahu, she took a property that was 101. 101 plus the previous sales of 300 is 401. Your ksuba is only 400. You made an error, not an error in judgment. You're wrong. They're different things. You hear that? The shliach had some latitude. I don't know what you normally do. Some people give 1%. Some people give 3%. I did 3%. So you can slap me on the wrist, but I didn't do anything wrong. She's wrong. It's different. They're different errors. And Amar Le, loi bay lach limite. And that's not fair. You can't make a mistake here. But that's what the Gemara says here is an important distinction. And we're still now holding that the shliach is treated like an almana, no room for error. If you ever want to be a shliach, you should learn this page of Shas and learn all the poskim around it. Amar Rab, we're halfway down, 3 lines before the wide lines. We're going to go till the second to last line and then we'll stop. Amar Rav Huna bar Chanina. Amar Rav Nachman, halacha kedibri chachamim. We paskin like the chachamim. This is the chachamim in our Mishnah. If you look back at the bottom of Tzadi Tesmid Beis, we saw machlokas between the Tanakama of our Mishnah, who said that the chachamim only have a margin of error of 1/6 in either direction, and Rashbag said no, there's koach chachamim. So then the Gemara says halacha is like chachamim. The Gemara says I don't understand. The leis leila Rav Nachman. Makoach bezdin yofet. Doesn't Rav Nachman agree to the principle of makoach bezdin yofet? What was the machlokes in our Mishnah? The Tanakam of our Mishnah said margin of error up to 1/6. Rashbag says no way, because if you say that, then what's the bezdin? What's the yofet koach bezdin? You're going to tell me Rav Nachman doesn't agree to yofet koach bezdin? That's impossible. Not only in concept, but the Gemara has an explicit mari makom that makes it really impossible. Last of the short lines. The Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel. Yisomim shabo lachlok b'nichsei avihen. The Yisomim came to divvy up, to give out portions of the property of their father. Bezdin ma'amidin lehen aputropis. They get a mediator. They get someone who's gonna decide. Uborilem chelak yafeh. He does all the divisions. Higdilu yicholen limchos. When they get older, they're all bar mitzvah now. Then they can complain about the atropuses, whatever the word is. I don't know about the allocations of the atropus. Rav Nachman didei Omar higdilu ein yicholen limchos. Why? Because im kain makoach bezdin yafeh. Oh, that's a dagger. That means that Rav Nachman most definitely holds of this principle of makoach bezdin yafeh. And if he holds it over here, why doesn't he hold it in our Mishnah? How can Rav Nachman say the din is like the Chachamim against the Rashbag when Rashbag's whole essence is Ma'yafa Koach Bezdin? I know Rav Nachman holds of Ma'yafa Koach Bezdin. I know he does. So if he holds it in source 1, why doesn't he hold it in source 2? The Gemara says Lo Kasha, Ha de Ta'u, Ha de Lo Ta'u. In one case, there was actually a mistake. And in the other case, there wasn't actually a mistake. Namely, in our Mishnah, when we're dealing with a mistake, they made a mathematical error. The item is only worth $100. You cannot evaluate it at $150. You can't do that. Our Mishnah is a ta'us. So he says we don't apply the principles of Ma'yav Koach Bezdin when there's a ta'us. Where do we apply it? In the case of where there's an accident. Okay, I gave a little bit more to the younger brother than I should have given him. There's just an accident. And says the Gemara, wait a second. If our case of the Yisomim, who now have an apotropos to make allocations, if there was really no error, why does Rav Nachman say b'ma'yichol and limchos? What are they arguing about? If Rav Nachman says that that's bez and koach yafet, so what was the reason why anyone would say that they could have ever been limchos? Says the Gemara, beruchos. What does beruchos mean? Well, do we have any real estate agents tonight? Where's Gerald? Location. Look at like a Rashi, 3 lines down from the top of the page. I've got other properties on the east side of town. I've got other properties on the west side of town. You gave me a property when I was a kid. I'm being mocha. You didn't make a mistake. It wasn't a toast. So in those cases, Rav Nachman is of the opinion that we hold a makoach bezdin yafet. No stira. And therefore, so far, it seems that we paskin like Rav Nachman, that we paskin like the Tanakama of our Mishnah, that a bezdin is only given a margin of error of 1/6. Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines into the wide lines. Omar, he says that there was in fact a story where Rebbe held like the opinion of the Chachamim, and Omar Lefanav, and then somebody said to Rebbe the following: Parta is a person's name. Bino shel Rebbe Lazar ben Parta, who was the son of Rebbe Lazar ben Parta, who was Ben Bino, the grandson shel Reb Parta Hagadol, obviously someone wonderful and great. Im kain makoach bezdin yafeh. They argued to Rebbe, how can you paskin like the Chachamim? After all, makoach bezdin yafeh. And what did Rebbe do? Well, Rav Nachman didn't exist yet. He couldn't say that he holds like Rav Nachman. Rebbe was the last of the Tanoim. Rav Nachman was a 3rd century Amor. They lived 100+ years apart, approximately. Says the Gemara, the Hichse Rebbe Asamaisa. Rebbe changed his shita. But what happened to the whole lumdas that we just gave? We just said that if there's a ta'us, then that's not where Makoach Bez and Yafeh fits in. Anyways, that's part 1 of the story. And then Rav Dimi Masni Hachi, that's how Rav Dimi taught this part of the story. But Rav Safra taught the story a different way. Rav Safra Masni Hachi, he taught the story like this. Maisa, and not that Rabbi Paskin this way, just ubikesh Rabbi Lasos Kedibri Chachamim. He was pondering the Shaila, and he said out loud, I'm not paskining yet, but I'm talking and learning. It seems to me this should be like the Chachamim margin of error of 1/6. And then before he paskined, Amar Lefanav, Parta ben Osher Rabbi Lazar ben Parta, Ben ben Osher Rabbi Parta Gadol, Im Kain Makoach Bezdin Yafeh, and then he didn't paskin that way. But all of this was pre-psak. Lo asa Rebbe Esamaisa. So what's going on here? Why are there 2 versions of this story? They're so similar. One is pre-psak and one is psak. Says the Gemara. Lema, perhaps, behaka miflage. Really, here's what the machlokes is about. Mar savar ta'abidvar mishnah choser. According to one shita, if a person makes an error, and Rebbe seemingly really felt that this was actually an error because he omitted the consideration of makoach bezdin yafeh. So if we say ta'abidvar mishnah choser, then great. No problem. It's a post psak, and now we can change our psak. Umar savar eino choser. But the other shita, this is Rav Safra. Rav Safra was of the opinion that if you make a mistake, you cannot go back. That's why one of the versions of the story was he hadn't given his psak yet. Because had he given his psak, he couldn't go back. So according to Rav Safra, we're talking about a case where we must hold eino choser, that if you make a mistake, you can't go back. Your psak is out. You can't put the psak back in the bag. And that's why the 2 stories are different. Says the Gemara, lo, that's not why the stories are different. Everyone agrees that if a Rav makes an error, he can go back and change the realities. What's going on here? Umar savar hachi hava maisa. Umar savar hachi hava maisa. This isn't, we're not making things up. This is what the stories were. This is exactly how things played out. And that would be the difference between them. We're going to stop right here. Emir Sashem on Shabbos. We'll pick up with Kuf Amud Beis and Kuf Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.